Right, hopefully this is working. I'm just going to check, make sure everything's broadcasting perfectly, and it looks like it is. Hello everyone, welcome to Mean Machine Talks. I am Mean Machine Dean, and we have a very, very special guest. But before we come on to him, because he is that side of the screen. See, it's that side, there we go. He's on that side of the screen. But before we talk about him, just a little bit of housekeeping. As you are probably aware, if you have been here before, or if you're brand new, there are some commands that you can use in chat, which is !podguest, which will basically give you a little bit more information about said gentleman. And if you put pod question with an exclamation mark in front of it, it will give you a link where you can fill in a form and ask a question directly, and I will pick it up directly next to me here, and we will have a wonderful Q&A session. Now, on to the actual podcast itself. The gentleman sat on that side of the screen has basically made me smile throughout my childhood years by creating some of my favourite games, one of which is now sat in the background there. And also, if you were here at the start, you probably would have heard a few of the pieces of music from it. It is Stu Cambridge from, or formerly, of Sensible Software. Stu, welcome to Mean Machine Talks. How are you, sir?
Hello. I'm very well. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you very, very, very much for giving me your time.
No problem.
As I said to you off stream, it's a little bit of a small dream come true to actually talk to a person whose name I have seen in Cannon Fodder and has been shot at quite a lot in every time that I've played Cannon Fodder. You're looking very well for a person who's survived many a battle in Cannon Fodder, as we can see in the background. But no, thank you very, very much for giving me your time. I can see many of you in chat are very excited for this, so thank you very much. But for those who don't know who you are, possibly, could you just give a 1-minute introduction to yourself, who you are, and what you kind of have been up to throughout your years? I know 1 minute's probably difficult, but I will leave it up to you.
I shall do my best. My name's Stoo Cambridge, and I'm probably best known for my work at Sensible Software, where we worked on games like Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder, Sensible Golf, Megalomania, Sensible World of Soccer, and many other little cover discs that we did along the time. So that's what I do. And I'm mostly known for my pixel art work, although I do other illustration work and writing and designing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, and I'm very much still into my retro gaming. So yeah.
I fact I didn't.
Was that like 10 seconds or?
That's all right. We're not too stringent. Well, I say we, like I've got some production team. It's me in a bloody back bedroom. But yeah, I'm not too stringent about the minute. It's perfectly fine. Everyone's happy as I am to have you on the podcast. And in fact, it's funny you say about retro, because I've noticed that what I'm going to dub the Tower of Power behind you, which has a lot of Windows boxes, a Game Boy. I'm just trying to see what else is there. Is there a Commodore 64 I see kicking around?
I've got Well, that's a canvas print that I'm sorting out for which is my new web shop, which I'm doing.
Which we will come to.
But basically, there's a little story behind that. That lot used to be there, over there in the studio. My wife wants to have she's into card making, so we're going to be setting up like a card making area and crafting area for her down there. So
cool.
All that lot's on there wasn't supposed to be there. So that's going to end up going back on shelving and in boxes again. But I've just chucked it over there just so it's out of the way and I'm not tripping over it.
So for anyone who's listening to this podcast rather than the video, there's essentially a tower of what I could describe as amazing retro things. So from Paint 3 to Mario Brothers to a Game Boy to a box of Microsoft Windows 95. What about that startup noise?
When I feel angry, I normally shout at it. I shout at the Windows 95 box because that's what you used to do back in the day. Well, I did anyway. But yeah, I've got PlayStation games, I've got Dreamcast games, PS2 games, SNES, Mega Drive.
I like it. I like the Stu Tower of Power. There we go. You can copyright that. You can take that from my podcast. Right. Anyway, we're not going to sit here and talk about it because I could probably talk about everything on that stack for some time. But I guess kind of what I normally do with my guests is kind of go through a little bit of a historical journey. So how did young Stu get into kind of pixel art making and leading up to your game design? What was kind of that journey from your youth all the way up to kind of, I guess, when you joined Sensible Software?
Well, I went to school in the 80s, sort of late 70s, 80s. So I grew up when the British computer boom was starting to happen. So when the Spectrum, appeared and the VIC-20 and then the Commodore 64, that was current tech for me at the time. So video games were new. We did the arcade games, which I was a big fan of. But I sort of saw these sort of machines coming out, and I was like, wow, that's like amazing, all these new gadgets. And I just thought, well, how do they work? And I kind of got a VIC-20 for a Christmas one year, and started to program it and get into it. But it was Jeff Minter really who kind of inspired me to look at that as a career option. Excuse me, because I'd seen the stuff he was doing. I was blown away at the quality of his work, and I'm still a big fan of his work today. And I just got into it from that, and thought, right, that's what I want to do. I want to be a video game developer. At the time, I didn't know whether I was going to be a programmer or an artist, because I used to code 6502 on the 64 and that. But I found that the art was far more immediate. There's more immediate results. Whereas if you're doing a bit of coding, you'd sit there working on a routine, it'd be buggy. But with artwork, with sprites and some graphics, right, that's an immediate result. It's done. So I kind of went to the art route, and that's it really. So I got into it for probably, when was that? It was teenage years, maybe 12, 13, something like that. But I was a big fan of Sensible, which is bizarre, because moving forward, I ended up working with the guys, But I completed Whizball in a weekend. I've left it on in my bedroom, and no saves back then, no saves.
Exactly.
So running all the weekend, and completed that game. But yeah, huge fan of all that stuff. And the thing, as a teenage boy, we didn't have internet. There's no video on demand, no YouTube. There's no streaming services. It was literally, that's your machine. You got your cassettes. You load the games in, and you just play and learn how to do stuff. So I loved it. It was great. Happy times, actually, very happy times. I think I'm quite grateful when I look back that I was involved in it at that time, because if I'd been born a little bit earlier, I might have missed it a bit, because I might have gone into something else. And if I was born a bit later, I might have missed the boat in getting into the industry when I did. So it's quite cool how the planets align, and you find yourself on this path.
No, absolutely, and I think that's it's quite nice you said, because I guess as you said, you kind of hit the, I guess, the computing revolution in this country. So I guess there was a lot of anticipation, interest in kind of what the computing world was up to, and what you could potentially do with these new things. And I think you're absolutely right. I think you probably entered, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably entered at that point where there was so much interest that any piece of knowledge that you gained probably helped carry on throughout the years as you went through, because you had that obviously historical knowledge of, from the start, how the fundamentals work. And I think that's a massive thing of knowing the fundamentals of what you do to carry on through what you do in your role. So okay, so we've got to there. So how did you join Sensible Software? This is a story I've not actually heard, so this would be a new one for me.
Yeah, well, a quick sort of recap. I bought the shoot 'em up construction kit, and I was programming some stuff on the 64, and I bought it purely just to profile some ideas. Because I thought it'd be a quick way just to try some ideas out and then kind of emulate them by my own code.
Sure.
And I did a game and got it signed to a publisher, which was a shoot 'em up construction game called Battle Ball, which you can download from Games That Weren't. Frank's got it up, which you can do. It's not good.
He's underselling himself now.
Yeah, but the great thing is that I got a check for it from the publisher, and I used the money I'd got for that to buy myself an Amiga. Well, go towards an Amiga 1000, which had just come out. So I built up a portfolio work on the 1000, and a mate of mine, I was around his house one day, and he'd had a game published, and the publisher he knew somebody in the publisher, and they said they were looking for artists. So I sent some work to them, got some freelance work with this company, and then fast forward a year, saw an advert in a computer magazine. And it was for Sensible Software.
Wow.
And they were advertising for artists and programmers. And I thought, shall I give it a go? And I did actually think to myself, no, they won't want me. I'm just some boy from Ilford. They're not going to want me. So I thought, okay, I'll got nothing to lose. Sent the disc off. No internet, so you had to do it all via the post. Sent the disc off with a letter. Didn't think I'd hear anything, but I did. Invited me up for an interview. Went all the way up to March in Cambridgeshire, where they were based, right next to the railway station. and had a really good interview. They said they'd let me know. Well, you think, well, yeah, let you know. So I got home, and then I think it must have been about a week or so later, I got a letter through the post. I can't recall if one of them phoned me, if whether Chris or John phoned me. I have recollections that one of them did, but they got a letter through the post, basically officially offering me the position, and said, like, we want to come join us as an artist, as our lead artist.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, these things don't happen, And I've said it before, but the way to describe the feeling is if you're a fan of a big rock band, whether like Pink Floyd or Iron Maiden or something like that, and they ask you to be their new lead guitarist. It's like, really? And that's how I felt at the time. I felt like I was joining like this mega developer. So I was just like on cloud nine for like forever. And then I started at Sensible, which was in 1990. When was that? 92, 91. So yeah.
What a brilliant story. And I guess, as you said, I guess it made it a little bit more special because you were obviously a fan of what they did as well. So obviously joining them, being a fan as well. I mean, I've always been an advocate that if it's something you have an interest in, and you obviously join a business that's working towards something that you're interested in, whether that's an art or, as you said, music and stuff like that. Strong musical choices there, by the way, I approve of. But if you join someone who you're advocately interested in, and obviously they made fantastic games till then, or onwards, I should say, and obviously that makes a difference. And you probably find you were probably a little bit more, I guess, committed for something that you obviously had an interest in the business. So as we know, one of your favourite titles that you made probably is said one there, which is Cannon Fodder. Lovely, so good. I'm sure most people in chat, and probably those who are listening to this on demand, probably at some point have accidentally got Stu shot whilst playing Cannon Fodder. But as you can see, he is doing very well. He has recovered from most of his wounds. So was Cannon Fodder your first task whilst you were at Sensible Software?
I was brought in to work on that project.
Right.
That was the game that they were, they were looking to expand, and because up until that point it was just John and Chris, who Chris Yates was programming, John Head did graphics and design, and that was it. And then they had Chris Chapman had come on board to do the programming of Megalomania. Right. So in the office, there was the three of them. But Martin Galway had left the company because he was part of Sensible for a short time as well. But he'd left the company a couple of months before I joined, which I was so gutted about. And so they wanted to expand so they could do more than one game at once. So effectively have two teams working under the Sensible umbrella. So I was brought on to do Cannon Fodder, and Jules was employed at the same time to do Cannon Fodder. But at the time, they were just finishing Megalomania, and that was going to be published with Mirasoft. And Mirasoft were in trouble. So there was a question over whether we'd started and then we would be made redundant straight away.
Right.
Because it all kind of went a bit pear-shaped for the deals they had with Mirasoft. Thankfully, they all worked out, and Cannon Fodder was started to develop. But the first thing I actually did for Sensible was a thing called Sim Brick, which I don't think was a recover disc.
Yeah.
And being a young impressionable lad, I thought, well, I'm going to impress them. I'll work all night getting these graphics. So I wouldn't do it now. It's just crazy. But I just stayed at the office. But the thing is, they were so trusting because they didn't know me that well. And I ended up staying on my own in the office working on these graphics for Sim Brick. And that was my first artwork I did for Sensible Software. Wow. as part of the team, But subsequently, we turned out loads of cover discs in the end, which at the time were a pain. But looking back, I'm glad we did them because they're a good sort of marker in history, things we did, and they're a bit quirky, some of them, And I'm proud we did them. I'm glad it was worth the effort. But yes, so that was a night I won't forget. I tell you, it was a very long night, and I was absolutely exhausted by the end of it. But yeah, if you look online now, you can see Sim Brick somewhere about, and it's Not bad.
I'll have to have a hunt around for that, actually, just out of interest. Maybe I'll play it on my next Amiga retro stream. Let's see. I'll see what I can do there.
There's a lot of skill involved, believe me. So, it's fantastic. And you've got to squash the ant. You've got to squash the ant.
One thing that I did just pop over in chat, and it actually was sat on my list of questions in front of me, was whose idea was it to do the Cannon Fodder song?
That's John Hare.
Oh, really?
John Hare. I mean, yeah. John's a musician, and Richard Joseph did the arrangement and mix it. Yeah. No, I mean John. Well, see, the thing is, John and Chris, Appreciates John Hare, they were in a band before Sensible was even a thing.
Right.
I think it was kind of prog rocky kind of stuff.
Right.
I think it was called, and John will probably correct me if I get it wrong. I think it was called Touchstone.
Right.
I think it was Touchstone. It might be wrong, but it'll be online. You'll see it online.
To be fair, that's a good name for a band. I like it.
I might be wrong now. It'll be on. If someone looks online, they'll see it. I'm sure it's on there somewhere. But so the idea of having music, like a proper musical track for each game, for me was like, well, this is a bit different, and that was it really. I mean, the first game that had, I would say, a singing track was Sensible Soccer. I mean, there was a very first one, which was Captain Sensible came in. There was a few legal things with these. I don't know if the ownership of the song. I don't know what happened there. And then obviously we did the Sensible Soccer songs, and then we did the Cannon Fodder song, and then that was it. But no, I mean John wrote all the songs for Cannon Fodder, and he's still. Yeah, I mean you can see him at some of the retro events. He will perform them. Yeah.
Maybe that's something I need to hit him up about. I'm just having a look in chat. They're saying that apparently the band was. So apparently he was in Hammerfish, Dark Globe, and Touchstone. So you were absolutely correct. So well done. Very good. Very good. Round of applause in chat for that memory. Get in. Very good. Well remembered. So I guess working on Cannon Fodder, I mean, were there particular areas that I've done a little bit of research. So I remember one of the things that you wanted to do was things such as small as I think it was the water effects in Cannon Fodder. You wanted it to be dark and murky, and yet John kind of wanted it as blue. How did you get past that kind of creative challenge? Because I mean, I deal with this on a regular basis at work, where you've obviously come in as a new designer, and obviously John was kind of done that job previous. So how did you kind of overcome that battle of creative differences? Was it just something that you did and then you saw the benefit in it, or was there more of an in-depth discussion about that, or did you just?
I mean, for me, and this is something I still apply today, is you have to see the bigger picture. And people will come and go. People will have opinions. People will have things they want to do, but as long as what you're doing as a team is in the same direction and you can see the bigger picture, what are you trying to achieve? And that's something I learned quite a long time ago. And that instance was was a pain in the arse at the time, because I'd drawn the I'd got the palette all set up, and as you know, with something like the Amiga, you've only got a limited colour palette.
Correct, yeah.
And when you're doing pixel art, and any pixel artist who'd work on those machines would do the same process. You'd pick a palette of colours that would cover the style of game you're developing. So with Cannon Fodder, we knew that to have explosions. So I made sure I had some yellow, some orange, and some red. We had green, so we needed stuff for foliage, but the green was also used for the uniforms. But I had to make sure that the uniforms were slightly different so you could see them. There's all these little things, but out of that 16 colours available, you carefully map which ones you're going to use. So I'd spent ages building up this palette over a course of a few weeks, with development, or months, I should say. And the original water was blue, because I thought it was a good contrast with the green. It looked quite nice. You could add some ripples and stuff.
Sure.
It was green, I should say, because it was swampy. Because I was trying to be more realistic and more, as you would expect it.
Sure.
And John says, no, it's got to be blue. I said, what do you mean it's got to be blue? He said, no, it's got to be blue because it will stand out better. Right. He said, yeah, but it'll be a good contrast. And I went, okay. So I tried it and I thought, yeah, okay, that works. And we went with it. And it was as simple as that. There was no kind of ego involved in it, or any kind of well, I'm the artist and I'm doing the graphics and this is my art. None of that at all. It's like you've got to see the bigger picture. You know, and the big picture was the game's going to be beneficial to everybody if we all say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do it. You know, and I think that's where the comparison with bands, when you hear like successful rock bands, and you know, they all contribute to the energy of the band, and then the final result is a culmination of all those you know ideas into one thing at the end. And that's how we worked at Sensible. Everyone put their ideas into things, and the end result was the product that came out, you know, on a disc, you know, so many months later.
And there it is. There is a result of your hard work. But you know, we said about this offline actually, and one of the things I said to Stu was that there's probably a lot of correlation now, as there probably was at your time at Sensible, which was, you know, obviously you were such a small team, but obviously you had no idea how influential that team was going to be. But sometimes having that smaller team, you almost, you know, you aren't pigeonholed into your roles. There's kind of a lot of crossover knowledge going on, so which I think is good, because I think sometimes when you get pigeonholed into specific roles, creativity can start to die a little, because you get so, you know, narrow focused into something. So probably based on what you're saying, there was probably a lot of crossover, maybe even with the audio, if people were listening to stuff and they were like, oh, you know, I don't think that quite sounds right. And, you know, obviously if you're an audio specialist and all you do is you're listening to audio, at the end of the day, if someone third party listens to that, they may not agree with it. So but I think most people would agree that the end result of Cannon Fodder was nothing short of brilliant. So yeah, I mean, one thing I was going to ask is, how did you feel about Cannon Fodder being, or any of the Sensible titles actually, being ported to some of the other consoles? Because obviously Cannon Fodder and a few of the other titles were ported. So what's your opinions on porting of an original into something else?
I have mixed feelings of ports, because I often saw versions of my art that had been tampered with.
Oh,
and I don't think tampered with in a way that was for any other reason than someone wants to put their mark on it.
Right.
And that used to drive me nuts. That used to drive me mad, because I you know, when you take, like I said, you take time to choose palettes and you get the colours looking right, and then someone in a conversion house says, oh well, I'm going to make that green brighter, and I'm going to add another green to that, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, because then I'll put my mark on it. It's my mark. I've done that conversion. Sure. Like I said earlier, you've got to see the bigger picture. You know, it's not about the individual; it's about the whole project as a whole. It's not. I agree. You know, and that used to wind me up. I mean, there was. I mean, the PC version of Cannon Fodder is a good example. I think it's that one where they blurred the hill screen for some reason.
Yeah.
But right, why? Yeah.
Added depth. It's not.
And the SNES, I think it was the SNES one. There's extra colours added to the palettes, which is nice, but it's too patchy. Right. So it's like, well, trees are green and the grass is a different colour of green.
Right.
There's no kind of like mixing of the two shades of green.
Sure.
Or the hue. It's like, well, I would have done that, but I would have added extra colours and shades inside the foliage, and I've done some bits on the grass and patches and stuff. I would have made it so it all looks like it's all part of the same environment. When we did conversions in-house, I did one of the first conversions I did was Megalomania. We converted Megalomania to the Mega Drive.
Mega Drive, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Now I started Sensible when Megalomania was still being finished,
right?
So I got to see the end of the project, and it was quite cool, because I was only a young lad, and for me, I was in a developer, and I was seeing the nitty gritty of how games are made in a professional developer studio. So when Jules and I stopped, we got the contract to do. We said we'll do the contract to do the Megalomania. The first thing we had was to convert the graphics over, and the thing with the Mega Drive, it's a totally different architecture to the Amiga.
Correct.
The Amiga's got, like, you know, I think it had 512 mega RAM, and mega RAM later. Whereas the Mega Drive's got, like, I think it had 64K of VRAM, and I think you could have up to an 8 megabit cartridge, which is a 1 megabyte cartridge. But the architecture's totally different. So we had to scale down all the big loading screen images. I had to scale them down. But because the art style was all stippled, I didn't do the art on the original. The art style was all stippled. I thought, well, if I scale them down, it's going to look a real mess. So I had to redraw every pixel of the Mega Drive screen in the same style as the original.
Wow.
Only so that when you look at it, they look as near as damn it the same. You know, it's not my art style. That stippling is not my art style. But because I was doing the conversion, I thought, well, that's got to be representative of the original.
Sure.
So important for that to look the same as that. So when we did conversion in house, we always tried to do it so that it was a good conversion and it was as near as damn it to the original. But some of them weren't. I mean, some of the ones that other people did, they were, you know, I wasn't impressed with. But I have to say, the Archimedes versions of our games were pretty good, from what I know. They were pretty good, the Archimedes versions. So yeah, but you know, but again, it all comes down to seeing the bigger picture. You know, it's not about you as an individual, but putting your mark on it. If the work's representative of the original, then you'll get the recognition for doing a bloody good job on the conversion.
Absolutely
agree.
Absolutely.
Rather than put something that stands out like a sore thumb. So,
I think,
but maybe I'm just bitter and twisted as I'm getting older.
No, not at all. And I think there's a lot to be said about care of work. I mean, as you said, you know, you took on a project that wasn't even yours from the start, and yet you painstakingly wanted to make it as replicated as possible. You didn't put your own spin on it because you wanted it to be exactly the same. And I think that's testament to your I guess your commitment to make sure that the package, or the I don't know what you could call it, the experience that's being experienced on one place is exactly the same and consistent across the board. And I think that's a very important thing. And I think, as you said, when it comes to ports, I think some of those, I mean, I'm just going through some that I've seen converted, they don't seem to have that right feel. And it sounds weird to say it, but sometimes you will play a port of something that's gone to a console from a PC and it just doesn't feel the same. It just hasn't got that thing that gets you. Funny enough, I've actually got a copy of Megalomania on the Mega Drive there, so I feel like cracking it open actually.
I mean, Sensible Soccer's the same. The Mega Drive version of Sensible Soccer is another one where we did that in house, and you know, I worked on that, but we added extra stuff to it because it's a console, and console games, you know, were expected to have a bit more presentation. So on the Mega Drive version, I drew the big players that came in, and we did the little stadium pre-match screen. But I also worked on the Jaguar version of Sensible Soccer, and a mate of mine got the job doing the conversion, and he phoned me up and he said, "Look," he said, "do you want to do the graphics?" He said, "Because you were familiar with the original, obviously." Although I didn't do the original graphics, John did, and I said okay. But if you look at the graphics for the Jaguar version of Sensible Soccer, all I've done is I've just enhanced them slightly for the extra colour palette that the Jaguar could offer.
Right.
So whereas the original sprites were like using one colour for the shirt, you know, and on the Jaguar version I might have 4 colours, so I can have a little bit of smooth shading on them. So, and like the shadows on the floor, rather than being like a single colour of like black or dark green, I've anti-aliased the edges of the shadows, but the graphics themselves are the same. So just slightly smooth, but not enough to make them different. You know, and that's the sort of thing.
This is going to make you laugh. So for anyone who was here from the start, I put a little bit of an animation screen. There was basically a couple of sprites from Cannon Fodder of the guy doing a salute, and then there was a tiny little sprite of one of the characters, or I should say one of the players from Sensible Soccer. And it was only until I looked at the sprite list that I spotted exactly what you said, and I was kind of looking, going, hang on a minute, these shadows are different. And it was only until you've just said that now, it's just clicked in my head why that was. So that's really fascinating, because it just shows that I don't know if anyone else experiences this or whether you have, but sometimes you'll play games and you'll be like, okay, cool, yeah. And then the more that you play it, the more that you notice really subtle things, like you said, that shadowing and stuff like that. So, but no, that's fascinating you said that now. That's making me laugh, because now I remember looking at that sprite list going, why has that one got a shadow and that one hasn't? And I'm like, now it makes sense. Now I get it. I am fully empowered by yourself. So, right, I'm going to quickly jump to a couple of questions that have come in. A very strong one that's coming from Rocksalt 9000. So thank you very much for everyone who submitted a question, by the way. He says, were you aware at the time of creating these games how much of an awesome legacy you were creating?
That'd be silly. No, of course, not really. I mean, as I said, you get engrossed and wrapped up in the work. You know, you're there to create You know, I mean, to quote the letter I got from John Hare, to work on shit hot games, and that's what I got when they said to work on shit hot games. So when you're in that kind of environment, you're not thinking of what it's going to be like when it's out and people buying it, and you're thinking about making the best game you possibly can. So if you do your best and it comes out as a good game, then you say, well, I gave it my best. You know, that's all you can do. You give your best. So the fact that people are now looking back on these games, and as a team, we worked collectively on these projects to make them the best we could. You know, shows that it worked. You know, that attitude and that kind of sort of work ethic does the job. It delivers.
I guess. Well, I
so
mean,
no, I don't think I did. I don't think I looked back at it.
Yeah, I mean, coming on to the back end of that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to think timescale wise, but I think was Syndicate being made at the same time as Cannon Fodder was?
Yes, because we I mean, again, you know, these are the days before internet and immediate news and everything. We got one of the I don't know what magazine, one of the magazines, whether it was the One or one of these multi-format magazines came out, and they had like coming soon. I think it was Syndicate, and you know, and you see games coming out which well, that's a similar thing to we do. But I've been asked this before. Someone said to me, "Oh, you know, was you concerned that it was going to be the same as?"
That's exactly what I was about to ask.
I said no, because it's like if you ask two artists to draw a picture of a house or a picture of an apple or a picture of a tree, it's the subject matter's the same, but the interpretation is going to be different.
Correct.
And that's the same as that's the way I've looked at anything we've done. You know, anything we did, and ever since, you know, if someone's doing a football game, you think, oh God, football, how can you do something different? But when you look at the range of football games that have come out over the years, you know, some of them are very good, some of them not so good, but they're all slight interpretations of the same idea. It's a game of football. So no, I mean, you could fall into the trap of saying, oh my God, what they're going to do? They're going to ruin it because we spent all this time making this game, and that one's coming out. Oh, that's our market gone. But it's silly because they don't know what you're doing. You don't know what they're doing. The best thing you can do is just say, that's great, let's get on with what we're doing and make it the best we can.
No, I agree.
So, no,
I think as humans, we often spend a lot of our lives probably comparing ourselves to others, or constantly looking over our shoulder to see what everyone else is up to, see if somebody's trying to replicate what we're trying to do, or trying to be like us, or trying to get the advantage. And I think, as you quite rightly just said, as long as you stick to your guns and you believe in what you're making, which I personally think is a huge thing, is that if you have that self-belief in what you're making, then the end result is going to be positive. And you know, thinking in my head of the game of Syndicate versus Cannon Fodder, I mean, the two games obviously do share some similarities, but obviously, you know, Syndicate was a lot more in depth of what you were requiring to do, and there was various different mission types that were very in depth, whereas, you know, Cannon Fodder is a very pick up and play game, right? I mean, anyone can pick that game up and play it. And I think that's probably the beauty of a lot of the games that you made, is that, and again, we said this before we started the podcast, is that the majority of the games that you made are literally, you pick them up, you play, you know, whether it be for, you know, 10 minutes or 10 hours, you know, I wouldn't advise playing it straight for 10 hours, but anyway, you get what I mean? Although playing Cannon Fodder for 10 hours would be good. But yeah, it's one of those beauty things where, you know, it's a pick up and play game and everybody can get some form of enjoyment out of it. Whereas probably with a game like Syndicate, which is equally just as brilliant, but it's a different, I guess, overall experience from what you were trying to achieve. And I guess probably part of the ethic of what you wanted from Cannon Fodder was probably something, you know, very pick up and play, very enjoyable, and obviously a great experience in the end, which most people would probably agree with me as well.
And let's not forget, I mean, when we started certainly a game like Cannon Fodder, we had no idea what the end result was going to be. We didn't have a clue. You know, we just knew what we wanted to create in terms of, it was a game that, you know, was a war style game, real time strategy style game, but arcadey as well, which is very important. But we didn't know what the result was going to be. You know, as you go along, you somebody might say an idea for something. And then it's like, okay, I mean, like, give you an example, Jules come up with this really cool system, whereas, I mean, the game used 16 by 16 tiles for the backgrounds. So Jules had this brilliant idea. He said, what I can do is I can split each tile into sort of like hit points. So you can then say, I can't remember if it was like a 4x4 grid or 2x2 grid. It was, and each hit point can have a value. I think 0 to 15. So 0 would be like ground level, 1 would be 1 below ground level, and then 2 and 3. Likewise, you can go above ground level. He says, so what I can do when I get the sprite going across that tile, it comes, oh, hit point 1. Oh, I'll sink the sprite down a little bit. Hit point 2, down further. Which is why when you see them going into the water, they go, because it's all to do with the hit point system that goes underneath the tiles. Likewise, when you see a hole in the ground and they go da, 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 and all of a sudden they go like that, and then they come up again. That's the hit point. It's just a hit point. So every tile I had to go through and edit in the cannon fodder editor the hit points on there. Brilliant idea, but that wasn't something that was designed from day one. That's something that evolved as the game developed. And there's lots of little things like that went into the project. You know, John would come with an idea of something, say to Jules, "Oh, can you do this?" And he'd say, "Yeah, I'll code it up." And then whatever, next morning or whatever, there'd be something running. Good example of that is the way that you can split off the guys into two or three groups. That was something that happened. And it kind of totally changed the dynamics of the way you could play the game, because you could say, well, I've got a couple of my little sort of lower ranked privates there. They are cannon fodder, so I will put them near somewhere where there's a lot of enemy coming, and I'll keep my generals and me higher ranking officers a bit further for later on in the mission. So therefore, you could then keep a couple of guys back, send all the minions in, and let them take the flak, and then while in the meantime, these other guys, as each mission is completed, are getting further and further advanced, because they also increase their firepower and their accuracy as well with it. So there's all these little dynamics that are going on behind the scenes in Cannon Fodder, which on first play you've got no idea that that's going on. But as you get through it, you think, oh right, I'll keep him. I'll know about that. And all these things just kind of evolve over time as you're developing the project. And I think that's the magic of the way that we worked, and I think that's representative of the way a lot of developers are doing things now. Like certainly the smaller studios are independent. They're having that kind of philosophy and that kind of take on it, where they're just evolving the ideas because that's how it works.
No, I agree. And as I said, I think there's a lot to be said about working in a smaller team, because as I said, I think by having a smaller team, there's probably a lot more creative expression. It's a lot easier to communicate your ideas or maybe your expressions of what you would like to see in the game, whereas if you're in a very large corporate, it's increasingly difficult to try and get up that chain to try and get your message heard. So but no, that's fascinating about the hit system. I always wondered how that works, so there we go, a piece of knowledge for us everywhere. Roxette was also asked, how did you start an idea for a game, inspirations for some of your classics? So I guess it's your creative start points. How do you kind of start your development?
I mean, one good example of that, and this is not sensible because we're sensible. John and Chris usually originated the ideas for the games, and
Sure.
we were just humble servants. That's it. One good example is I did a game with a friend of mine quite a few years ago, called Blobbit Push, and that started life as just my mate said to me, like, Mark, he said to me, can you do some graphics for this simple game I've come up with, where it was just literally you had to run around and collect things, avoiding other baddies that were just a single screen. And then you think, well, that's a bit naff, So then you start creating ideas and you come up with characters, and all of a sudden you start to think of something that stems off of that. And then before you know it, you've got this kind of like little world evolving. So I mean, you could think of it. You walk down the road and you could have an idea for a video game. It's not so easy now because everyone is making video games. There's so many games out there in development. But what I would say is, if you've got an idea for a game, just go for it, have a go, and just think of it, because there are so many tools available now to get games working. I mean, there's so many free engines you can use. Agreed. There's publishing platforms you can use. There's loads of stuff out there. Resources are everywhere. Just give it a go. But inspiration just comes from everywhere. Just go out for a walk. Just go out for a walk around the in the country, or even wherever you live. Just go for a walk and you might see something and it sparks an idea. You think, right. And that's just that. I mean, that works for me with writing. You know, when I'm writing, I think, oh, that's a great idea, and then you make a note of it, or a piece of artwork. So yeah, I mean, they come from everywhere. So yeah, I don't think there's any particular method I use. It just enters in here from wherever and translates into whatever art form that's suitable.
Yeah, it's funny how everyone works, because I guess to some degree, I mean, not that I'm a game developer, although I will be starting that soon on stream if people actually want me to do that. But yeah, I mean, for me, I use a lot of notebooks and a lot of the note function on my phone of just jotting random things down, because you never know, you may go back to it and actually resort back to it. So, but no, it's fascinating to hear that. But one other thing I was going to ask is, when you were creating the graphics for, say, a Cannon fodder, was it Deluxe Paint that you were using, or was it something else on the Amiga?
Yeah, I used Deep Paint 2. I think it was Deep Paint 2 when I first started. And that was my kind of like go-to bit of software for everything to do with graphics on the Amiga. I mean, there was other software packages that came out, but Deep Paint was the Photoshop of its day. You know, everybody was using it. And then obviously, people obviously who used the ST were using like Neo Paint and other like that. But I always used my Amiga with Deep Paint. And then later on, I think it was must have been around the time of just before we moved offices. Would have been WizKid, when WizKid was coming out. I went over to using a piece of software called Brilliance 2, which was faster than D-Paint, and it offered a few extra bits and pieces that D-Paint didn't have. But the great thing about it is it had exactly the same keyboard shortcuts. So I would sit there, and why I work when I do pixel art is I have this hand, the left hand on the keyboard with all the keyboard shortcuts, and this hand's firmly placed on the mouse, and I'm drawing, and I'm using the keyboard while I'm working. Brilliance, which is, I mean, you know, I think, well, we'll get the audience from D-Paint and bring them over to our software because they use the keyboard shortcuts the same. So I went over to using that,
Right.
and that's what I use ever since.
Yeah.
But these days I use ProMotion by Cosmico. That's what I use for pixel art these days.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant piece of software. Anyone who wants to get into pixel art, go and check it out, because it's a fantastic piece of pixel art software for the PC. It's really superb, and you know, it's being developed continuously as well. You know, really good.
That's cool. Well, AVX Studios has asked, what was your development setup like when you were developing SWOS? A sensible word of soccer for those who don't know.
Yeah, see, I only worked on some of the graphics for SWOS, but I did share the office with Chris, who wrote Sensi Soccer and SWOS. And the way the games were coded was, you'd have a PC, and in the back of the PC would be like I think it was an ISA card. I'm back with it now, and that would connect directly into the back of the Amiga. And then in the Amiga, you'd have a boot drive, a boot floppy disk that would sit in there. When you reset the Amiga, it would boot this disk up, and it would just sit there waiting for data to come down the parallel port.
Right.
And the PC would be waiting for the Amiga to say, "Yeah, I'm ready." And so you're coding on the PC, and you go, right, assemble, whack all the code down to the Amiga, and then run it. The great thing about this system, or that system, I think it was PDS they used, was that you could also get it so that you could have real-time monitoring of the registers and stuff like that. So you could get feedback of what's going on inside the machine. So if you're doing it on one machine, like you're coding on the Amiga and assembling it and running it on the Amiga, the machine crashes. It's like, well, what the hell happened now? But using something like a cross-development system, you can see and you can say, what's going on with that? Why is that not working properly? So that's how Cannon fodder was developed as well. That was using PDS. You know, you just had a PC, all the code on there, and it squirts it down the cable into the object machine.
Just out of interest, is there any photos of the development kind of back behind the scenes or anything? Just wondered off the top of my head.
I think there's a couple on my website, but I've got a feeling there's some more about.
Interesting.
I've got to get some back, because I did have some when the Sensible book came out, and I did lend a few out for that. But I've got a few about. But yeah, there was a few pictures taken. I mean, on my website, I've got a couple of me on there being stupid from Sensible at the time. When I had my big hair.
I was gonna say about that. I had a quick look earlier, because I like to do a lot of research with my guests. But yeah, I did notice you had a very strong long head of hair back in the day, which was quite impressive, I must say.
It was very good. I admire it every day.
But yes, if you do want to check out Stu's website, if you put !podcast, there is a link to his Twitter and to his website there. Also, for anyone listening to this on demand, it will be in the description of the podcast below. On to the next question, then I'll carry on with my normal chats for now. Sazzle Doom has asked, would you consider, and I kind of want to half answer this on your behalf, but I will let you start. They said, would you consider making a modern day version of SWOS for systems like the Nintendo Switch, with the same sort of graphical approach? For example, a very similar visual style, but with upgraded graphics and quality of life improvements that weren't available on the original systems.
See, I was only involved in SWOS for like small bits and pieces. I didn't do the bulk of the work on that. I did the crowd and I did some small enhancements to some of the sprites and that and the menus. I think what's happened in certainly in recent sort of years is pixel art has become an art form in itself, and it's been replicated as an art form within video game. Whereas back in the day, that was it. You had no choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You had 16 colours and they were fixed, or you had 16 colours and you had a palette of 512 or 4,000 or whatever. As for making another one, I mean, there are plenty of games out there which certainly use that kind of approach. I mean, John's got Sociable Soccer, which is not pixel art. I played that about a year or so ago, and it's really, really, really good. But I don't know whether a new SWOS would. I don't know. I mean, would it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was playing around with, and I don't know if you're aware of, but there was a SWOS 2020 that was made, which was essentially taking the original SWOS, and it's been given a kind of, I guess, a revival kick up the backside, you could call it. So it's got like commentary, it's got like the latest players and stuff like that inside of it. It's actually got online gameplay as well on the PC. So I have a funny feeling that if it slowly started to gain a bit of traction and this started to become very popular, because there are so many people still playing SWOS even till this day, right? I think that on the Switch would be amazing. Like that with online gameplay. It gets a big thumbs up from me. So, and I think most people would probably agree. So there we go, Twitter. Let's get something going. let's get Stu back on board and all the crew, and let's make a new SWOS for Switch. There we go. Even makes sense and rolls off the tongue correctly as well. So there we go. But I guess one thing I wanted to come on to was kind of your life after Sensible Software. So. I mean, I've kind of had a quick look, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you worked on Alien Hominid, is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I know sort of Alex and Mark from Tuner Technologies, and I met them when I was at when did I meet them? Just after while I was working at Central, I think. And they said, "Do you want to work on a couple of projects with them?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" So I did some of the sprite stuff on that. These are on Game Boy Advance. I did Alienators Evolution, which was another one I worked on. Did all the backgrounds on that one, which is a lot of fun. I really like that. I really like the Game Boy Advance. I think it's such a lovely little machine. It's got all the right bits of hardware that ticks all the right boxes. It's got enough colours, it's got enough playfields, enough sprites. It's just a great machine.
I couldn't agree more. Funny enough, I was going through some of the back catalogue of even the Game Boy Color to some degree, and some of the games that were made on that, and I was like, this like, there's a lot of games that you obviously miss, and like now obviously we've got the ability to go back and have a look at those, and you slowly start to realise how clever people were when they were developing games like that, and especially graphical pixel art, as you've obviously excelled in your career. But yeah, going back and you start to look at these graphics, and you're going, this is bloody clever. Like, how do they manage to fit all of that into something that big, But yeah, it's as you said. I mean, I still think the Game Boy Advance is probably one of the best handhelds ever made, period. I know that's probably going to trigger off a load of people in chat, but I think graphically and for what it achieved, it was just fantastic. And it had the most ridiculous battery life as well. I don't know how it just wouldn't die. It was like, will you die? Like, no, I will keep on playing. You must play longer. It's like, okay, all right, fine. You are the powerhouse.
They really do.
one interesting question that's come through from AVX Studios says, did you encounter any development challenges on older systems where features you would have liked to have had added were scrapped and not fully realised? And if you were to remake an older game, would you attempt in bringing those potentially lost features and ideas back? Ooh, interesting.
Oh, that's not a bad question.
That's a strong question. I like it.
I can actually give an example. I wasn't involved directly with the project, but we were developing Megalomania 2.
Oh,
and
you
I remember, yeah, and that was going to be 3D. That was going to actually have a 3D background system in it. I can't remember the full ins and outs of how it worked, but I think it just wasn't going very far because I think the ambitions of the way the project was supposed to be going, I don't think the machines were quick enough to render the stuff out in the manner that we needed it to perform.
Sure.
So I don't know whatever happened to the design for Megalomania 2. I know that was it. Once that was finished, we never, once that development was held, and it was like, we're not doing no more on that one. That was it. So it's a shame because I think it would have been quite a nice evolution of Megalomania, because I think Megalomania, it's just a brilliant game, absolutely brilliant game to play. And I can say that because I never worked on it, so I'm biased. I only worked on the conversion, but it's a brilliant game. So it would have been nice to have seen that Megalomania 2, but I think at the time the machines that we had, like the Amiga and ST, I don't think they were capable of running the sort of things that John and Chris were trying to get out of the design. So, but most of the time, I mean, to give you an example, I mean, there's like with Cannon Fodder, I mean, this is why the Amiga was such a great machine, because you come across a challenge, and you think, well, how are we going to do that? And you think, well, you got the hardware can do this and can do that, and you kind of work around these obstacles because the hardware was so good. So a lot of the time, you just worked around it and got the best out of the machine that you could, just using whatever means possible. And the same with the consoles. I mean, the consoles are the same with the Mega Drive. Look at the Mega Drive itself. Very limited hardware, but the stuff you can see on the Mega Drive is just like, wow. It's like an arcade machine in the living room at the time. So there wasn't a lot of that. No, I don't think there was a lot of that stuff that went on where we had limitations, or we felt that there were limitations. I mean, certainly with something like Sensible Soccer, I mean, Chris had this really clever multiplexing system going on with all the sprites and the blitter objects, and so I remember he on his monitor he would literally have loads of these post-it notes, and he'd have them plastered up and down his monitor, right? And he'd have little lines drawn. And it'd say, like, that routine would be there, and that routine, so we can measure the raster time of how long each routine. And he'd stick them all on his monitor, and I'd say to him, Chris, what? He goes, oh, that's so I can see where the routines are timing on the vertical interrupts, so I can see how far I've got. And you think, blimey! Now today, you go on to say, like, I don't know, Unity or Godot engine or whatever. It's all there. It's all there. You just write the game, and obviously you've got technical limitations and stuff,
Sure.
Right? But all the other stuff that goes behind the scenes, you don't have to worry about any of that because the machine does, the system does it for you. So I think we tried to squeeze as much as we could out of the machines we worked on.
I absolutely love hearing stories of that, of how something as simple as a post-it note can help someone in development. I mean, and I think that's part of the charm, right? Is when you start to think back of some of these games, and that's why I'm so grateful to even be able to talk to people like you, because it's almost a legacy that's slowly being lost. Because, as you said, modern game development, not that it's easier, but I guess the charm of, as you said, you had a smaller team, it was unknown territory for most of you in terms of the games that you were going forward into. So hearing these fantastic stories about using post-it notes and the development process and stuff like that, it's just brilliant, because I think a lot of those stories are slowly being phased out, because you hear a lot of stories of these big corporates and you don't get these interesting things. But I think especially in the last year, 2 years, there's a massive indie push going on, where I guess the kind of bedroom coders of past are now starting to slowly come through, and that revolution is almost starting to happen again, where you're starting to see the big corporates take a bit of a hit, and now obviously these indies are now starting to come through and slowly claw away at some of these big powerhouses. So which again is fantastic to see. And I love Megalomania. I think it's one of those titles that people don't talk about enough because it was my. It's funny because people don't quite know what to class it as. I still class it as a real-time strategy.
Oh,
And I remember watching my dad play it, and I was like, this looks brilliantly hilarious, but interesting at the same time. So again, it was combining that kind of, I guess, the sensible ethic of simplicity, but with a little added twist to it. And it really is, honestly, if you've not played it, it is absolutely fantastic. And yes, as my brother has just pointed out in chat, a big shout out to Dad for buying the Amiga. Good job. So, but yeah, I guess it's a bit of bittersweet thing for me because hearing that there was a potentially second Megalomania on the horizon it's that what if question, right? What if it came out? Could it have been the Command and Conquer, the Age of Empires, the series that it could have carried on? But I don't know. Maybe a Kickstarter for the future. I'm going to leave that one with you.
well, there was a diary of a game in I think it was in Zap 64.
Oh.
Not Zap 64. Was in Mega Power, I think it was. For Megalomania 2. So if you go on some of the archives for the Mega Power, I don't know which issue it was in, but there was I think it was about a 2 or 3 entry version of that diary. I think 2 or 3 episodes of that. Was Dave Coleman was coding it. He was documenting some what he was doing, and there are some screenshots in that magazine. There are some in there. So, and I often think, what would have happened? I mean, give an example. I mean, take a game that a lot of people may not have heard of, or maybe say, hey, Mirror Signal Manslaughter, which is a game that we were going to do. That was GTA effectively.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't exactly the same, but it was along the same lines. And that was way before even GTA even made an appearance. And that never really got legs and went anywhere. That was just a screenshot I produced. But no one was interested in taking it at the time.
What a shame. But yeah, the Megalomania 2, damn it. I wish you'd never told me now. That's going to be keeping me up at night now. A rather interesting question has coming from the Amazing Pillock, and I don't know if this is an in-joke or a serious question, but I will ask it anyway. Scotch egg or sausage roll?
Sausage roll.
There we go. On to the next question.
Sausage roll.
I guess Sensible Software were pretty much powered by such confectionery.
Takeaways, the usual array of goodness.
Strong. Lots of cups of tea and biscuits and plenty of curry. Yeah, beer. Rocksalt 9000 has also asked, who came up with that awesome death animation? I'm assuming he's referring to the one in Cannon Fodder. I'm guessing you meaning the guy bleeding out, possibly.
Well, I did all the graphics and animations and everything.
There you go.
But if you're talking about shooting him again, and he carries on going, oh, that's Jules.
Okay.
You can shoot them and you can keep shooting them, and they keep going, and you can bounce them around the screen by shooting them. That's Jules.
What a hero. It's funny because I sadistically used to keep doing that, I will admit, and I think most people did, I hope. Or I've just confessed that I'm an absolute maniac. But never mind. Neil from the Retro Man Cave, friend of the channel. Good to see you, Neil.
Hello, Neil.
Have you convinced your son that you're a legend yet? Is the question.
Well, Neil's met Charlie, my son, and I think he'll know that that's probably a bit pushing it a bit too far to try and convince him that I'm a legend. So...
Just show him the podcast. Show him the podcast. There you go.
I think, Neil, next time you meet him, you'll have to tell him how much of a legend I am, and I'll bung a $5 in the post for you. And a pint of beer as well.
Fantastic. One last question that's coming, which is, what do you think of the Godot engine for 2D games? Not something
I love it. I've not used it actually, but do you know what? I've been watching this for a couple of years, and I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of stuff that I'd like to. And if I was going to code up a game myself, just for fun, I would probably try and use that, because it just looks like it's got all the right things just to get into making games. I think it's developing really, really well. It seems to have a really good community. It caters for 2D from what I can see, really, really well. Also covers 3D as well. So if you want to, go the 3D route, you can bring stuff in from, say, Blender or whatever. And I'd give it a thumbs up. I'd give it a go. If I'm honest, I'd love to give it a go myself. I'd love to try it myself. But I just haven't had the time to get into it. But it looks like a very kind of flexible system. The language it uses is, I think it's kind of like is it like a Python Lua kind of scripting it's got in there? So yeah, give it a go. Love it from what I've seen.
I'll have to put that one in my to try. Yes, if it's got your approval, then it means it must be.
Well,
good.
I haven't tried it. I'm just going by what I've seen, but
he's backtracking now. I'm kidding. Yeah, he's pedaling back. He's pedaling back.
No, that's all right. It looks good.
No, I will have to give that a go, and I think that's something that I guess we touched on it earlier. Is that I think there's still a lot of fear, I think, for people who may have an idea but don't quite know the right way to go about it. And we said about this previously before we went on the air, which is there's so much resource out there. I mean, YouTube alone has so much. I mean, we were talking about simpler stuff as putting 2 MP3 files together, and how easy that can be now. And there's so much resource out there. There's so many tools, especially free tools, that are available now. So I think if you do have that idea that you've always wanted to do, or if you just want to dabble in something, as you did, I mean, look at your, I guess the spark of your career, which was kind of, getting into it and then eventually applying for a job out of the blue, and it ended up, I guess to some degree forming your entire career up until this point. So if there's ever a rags to riches cool story about a boy that kind of became good, this guy. There we go. That finger. There we go. That guy there. And as I said, I mean, I've kind of followed your story kind of for a while, and obviously played many of your games, as you can see behind you. And it's fantastic to obviously be able to talk to you and hear these stories, because again, I mean, I've said this before, which I think is there's almost this. There's not enough talk about the kind of creative process of things. I think a lot of people just put stuff out there and say, "Hey, here's me. I've done this thing. Aren't I cool?" And it's like, yeah, but how did you get there? Because I think a lot of things that are important are taking a look back and helping others come up to your level, because almost if you bring everyone up to your level, then you're almost helping the community and everything kind of improve as well. So and again, going back to kind of your days at Sensible, I guess that was kind of the case there, where everyone was kind of adding their own little bit and improving based on what everyone else was saying. And I've always been a firm believer that that keeping a community alive through the learnings of others is so important, so important. One thing I didn't know about, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this was something I found online, is that you apparently were involved, I'm not sure, I will wait for your answer, in Ian Livingstone's Death Trap Dungeon.
I was, yes. That was very recent as well.
Indeed.
And yes. Matt and Mark, Branching Narrative, set up a company to bring those wonderful books to a new audience, and an old audience as well, because the feedback we had at EGX last year was mind blowing. People just loved it. It's basically an interactive video version of the Final Fantasy book. So I was involved in all the UI, all the animations, designed the logo, did all that sort of stuff, and it was just an incredible project to work on, because it just took an idea, which you think, well, is that going to work? And it's like we've got Eddie Marson doing the narration, who I mean, if you've not, check it out on Steam. It's on Steam now. Death Trap Dungeon by Branching Narrative. Check out the trailer, right? And tell me that you don't want to buy it and play it, because you look at it and you're just engaged. You're actually absorbed into it, And yeah, it's a project that I wouldn't normally work on, something like that. It's not normally a thing. I wouldn't really get involved in sort of projects like that. But I know Matt and I know Mark, so it's like, okay, yeah, I'll lend my expertise and we'll see how we get on. And it worked out really well.
I'm quite relieved that my research is correct, because there was a panic slightly, so that's made me feel slightly at ease. But yeah, I was going to say, actually, because that's exactly what I was going to ask, because it's not, I guess, your conventional graphic path based on, I was kind of looking at your history of the type of things that you've worked in, and this kind of stuck out, and it was the last thing on that list, and I was going, okay, well, let's check if this is correct, and if it is, then we'll go into it a bit more. So I guess, looking into that, I mean, How long was it in development for? Do you know?
They gave me a bell not long after they'd got the basic system running. So Matt was doing all the video narration initially, and they got the system running, and then they got the filming done with Eddie in a proper professional recording of Eddie doing all the narration of all the different segments to make up the book. I think it was probably about a year, actually, just under a year, maybe. If you take in the time it took to get the system up and running and all working correctly,
Sure.
And then put all the video stuff on top of that. So yeah, it was quite. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, my involvement was probably about 6 months on and off. So, but it wasn't my normal sort of project. But I used I used a lot of stuff that I would use in a video game or in that. Give an example. There's a map in that, and the map that I created that was all hand drawn. Wow. It was hand drawn tiles like you would make in a video game map, and they all joined together. It's a hand drawn map, but I've had to draw it so that all the bits join together, and it's drawn to look like it's an actual continuous map. Whereas rather than giving them this massive map of the whole of the dungeon, it's all made up of little corridors that I used Tiled to do that, which is the open source one. Use that to do that. But yeah, it's great project. But check it out. I mean, it's on Steam now. It's not going to break the bank. It's good value for money, and you'll spend ages playing it because it's just wonderful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because it came up as a recommended title, and I was going, okay. So I clicked on it, and I didn't really realise that you had that much involvement in it. So I actually played it, and you're absolutely correct. You get absolutely absorbed into it, especially with the narration, because it's done so well. But yeah, it is a fantastic game to experience. There is one last question that I have to ask you.
Well, can I just say one thing?
You certainly can.
There's another project which I'm really, really, really proud to be associated with. It's a game called The Dwarfs of Glissenveld, which is also on Steam.
That sounds very familiar.
And that is a real-time strategy game, but it's all with dwarves. But it uses I did all I created the dwarf characters for it based on their And if you want to see my latest pixel art, that's in that game.
Okay.
And again, that's not going to break the bank. It's on Steam at the moment, early access. And look, the guys and the girls who developed it, they deserve a lot of support because they're a really great bunch. And I think it's very difficult to get the limelight at the moment with projects. And these guys have been developing. I think they've been in development for about 3 years. Right. So, but yeah, check that out. Dwarves of Glissenveld on Steam. It's really, really good. Really good game.
If you want dwarves that want to fight each other, that is the title. So one thing I was going to ask. You obviously are well established as a SWOS player. Would that be correct in saying?
So.
Okay. So I have to ask, what was your choice of joystick when you were playing SWOS? The reason why I ask is there was a small discussion that I got involved in on Twitter, and I have one of these, and this is a Cheetah the Bug. Okay, this is apparently the godlike top tier joystick for SWOS. But I want to hear it from you. What was your choice of joystick?
Right, well, I can tell you what everybody in the office liked. They like the conic speaking.
I've got one of those. Hang on, give me a minute. I'll grab it. Hang on, I'll grab it right now. I'm gonna break podcast tradition and try and keep this podcast professional. But yeah, I try and dodge through things. Right,
you've got me on.
I've got a whole box. I've got a whole box of the best, only the best, and there is a conic speaking. Look at that.
That's the one.
Look at it.
That's what was used to test Sensible Soccer on and Sensible World of Soccer on. That was the one that
we can have some ASMR. We can listen to that micro switch. Oh,
yes. You can't beat that sound, can you? No, you can't beat that. So when you play the game, but my choice is the zip stick. Can you remember the black one with the yellow buttons?
Oh, hang on. Have I got one of them here? Is that a zip stick? Hang on, I can't see.
The black one with the square yellow buttons. They were square buttons.
Well, I've got one that's got purple buttons, but that.
See that I didn't know about that until recently because I saw that recently and I thought I didn't even know they did one.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of them in the back room down here. I've got a box with like joysticks and things in storage down there. So I've got That was my favourite joystick.
To be fair, that conic speaking, I mean, that wasn't the original one that I had, but yeah, in my family, that was the creme de la creme of joysticks. So I guess now I'm gonna have to test the bug versus the speaking now. Damn it, you shouldn't have said
I
that.
think the speaking was but I don't know whether we had the bug in the office. I don't think we had that
Oh.
one. I think they just bought a job lot of speakings.
Just going through them, like just battering through them, and like, oh, we'll get rid of that one. Right, give me a substitute of that.
Can I say, definitely not the quick shot one with the button on the top.
Oh, what savage! What savage thought it was a good idea to put a button on the top? If you definitely want RSI, it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a bad decision that. So I guess coming into sort of the latter parts of the podcast, I mean, you said that you've worked on a variety of different things. So I guess I'll open this back up to yourself. Is there anything that you've got going on that's cool or interesting that you want to talk about? I mean, you mentioned the shop and stuff earlier.
Yeah, I mean, because of all the lockdown and all this sort of stuff that's been going on, I've said it sounds a bit silly, really, but I've always wanted my own little shop, just to sell my artwork and just to say it's mine. I know it sounds a bit daft. Well, there's two things actually. I always wanted my own white van with my logo on the side, which is bonkers. No idea why. No idea why.
As long as it's not a Robin Reliant with Trotter's Independent Traders, then you're all right.
But I always want that's not going to happen because I've got no need for a van. But I've always wanted a shop, and I thought, well, do you know what? I've had a domain name I set up a while ago. I never really got with it, and I thought, well, I'll set this shop up, which is going to sell. Initially, I'm selling canvas prints of my artwork and some bits and pieces like that.
Nice.
And then I'm going to be selling posters of my work on there. But it won't be. I'm not going to be selling like loads and loads and loads and loads of different versions of a piece of art. It'll be like the artwork is designed for canvas. So rather than putting a piece of art on canvas and then that's it, the actual art has been designed for the wraparound of the canvas, right. So it will look good on the wall. I mean, I've got I haven't got some finals here yet, but I've got something like that, which I don't know if you'll see that on the. Yeah. Well, that's quite cool. That's the one. And then you've got like this sort of thing, which is all the retro computers.
Lovely. So,
but the ones I'm doing are 3 centimetre deep. This is a very thin one. I wasn't happy with that one. That's not. I might give that away in a competition at some point. That's not a. It's all right, but it's not the final one. But that's the sort of thing I'm doing.
Cool.
As well as pieces, I might do. I've got some Sensi Soccer, I've got some Cannon fodder, I've got some Megas, STs, I've got to draw an ST, Spectrums.
My wallet just twitched then. Stop it.
Yeah.
I'm not spending more money.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff about, and there's a lot of stuff in the retro community, but it's all regurgitated, a lot of it's regurgitated. And I thought, well, I'm always like to do stuff that's fresh and new. So I've been drawing Amigas, I've been drawing like 64s, I've even got a Commodore 16, I've been drawing these.
Wow.
And the idea is to put them on print. So if you're a fan of the 16, you can have that on your wall. If you're a fan of the VIC-20 or the Commodore 64, you can have it on your wall in your man cave or your studio or whatever. But I've been working on that last couple of months, and it's a lot of work. A lot of work, but I'm nearly there. I've got it all almost ready to go.
Is it? Was there going to be links from your own website to that particular site?
Yeah, I mean the website's called thedesigndroid.co.uk, but you'll be able to see it from StooCambridge.com because I've got a shop bit there which will then link to it. But I've actually worn, because I'm obviously an attention whore. I've actually put the T-shirt on with the logo.
Oh, look at that! See, look at that! I like a man who's branded. Look at that. See?
Yeah, I think my wife would rather brand me at times, but that's another story. But yeah, so it's all ready to go. I've just got to finish some products. I've got a few little nitty gritty bits to put, like legal text. What's the legal text? But we're pretty much ready to go. I'm hoping to go live within the next 2 weeks.
Awesome.
So, but if you I'm going to be putting it all over Twitter, and people will get sick of me with it. But
Well, I've
it
just
is what it
actually
is.
put your Twitter and website link into chat, and as I said, if you are listening to this on demand, those links will be in the description. But yeah, I think we can wrap it up there. So I'm going to turn off the questions, and I'm going to put the iPad to one side, and I'm going to turn back to you and say thank you so much, Stu. It has been
No, it's my pleasure,
a
mate.
pleasure to have you on. It's been a nostalgia trip for me. I managed to get the Conic speaking out. That's happened. That's the first time that's happened on stream. And yeah, I think from all of us in the community to you, I thank you to you as well for doing everything you have, because not only have you given us brilliant artwork and great games, but as I said, you've from what I've seen from the interactions you've had with other people, you have been a massive advocate of doing the right thing and doing it well. And I think that's testament to yourself. And as you said, you like to keep people interested and involved, and you're constantly reinventing yourself and getting involved in different projects, like we said about the Death Trap Dungeons. So, but no, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to talk to you. And who knows, we may get you back again in the future.
I'd love to come back.
There we go.
Love to come back.
There we go.
As long as I get me a cup of tea, make sure I have a cup of
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. So as long as we get you copious amounts of tea, we'll see. But yes, thank you so much. And also to everyone in chat who's submitted questions and joined us live. And also for anyone who's listening to this on demand as well. So from me and from Stu, I'm going to go and give him some time back, because he's probably got loads of stuff to be getting on with anyway. But yes, I will sign off now. Me, Machine Dean, sign out. From me to you guys, stay safe, stay well, and I will see you next time. Take care and have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.